certain players where they won one championship and they're forever viewed as better than all the players that didn't win one. And I think that that classification is a little bit wonky for me. It's a little unwarranted. Like, does that make Dirk Nowitzki really better than Charles Barkley because he has one championship? You know what I'm saying? When
I
prior to that
mean,
championship, like Dirk Nowitzki was like, there were so many questions about his career and his toughness and all of these other aspects of his basketball career. But once he was able to win, it kind of washed away all of those things.
Let me put you on game.
this actually segues us into another topic that one of the two superstars in these series is going to have to deal with for the rest of their careers, because one of them is not going to win a championship this year. And we all know that championship windows are notoriously short. And so are NBA championships overrated? What do you feel about that? Because I have an interesting principle that I'm going to kind of tell you about after you give me your take.
I think they are in a way. I think that if you're talking about great players, I think that basketball being a team sport, despite the fact that one player does have a large influence over winning and losing, more so than a sport like baseball or football, I think basketball players have more power to exert their will on games, especially because they play both ends. But I think that when we do have these conversations about great players, like let's say a Charles Barkley or a Steve Nash or a John Stockton, like their greatness a lot of times is defined by their lack of championships. When in a lot of cases, like if you want to look at someone like Charles Barkley or John Stockton, they just happen to play at the same time and be in the same time, have their primes line up with what many people consider to be the greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan. Like he ran the 90s. So it's like there's only so many players that could win. And when he was gone, there was another great player, Hakeem Olajuwon, that was able to take advantage of him being gone.
Yeah.
So it's a tough argument. I think that there's so much focus on championships because of uh the narrative based sports media. Like you can point at a guy like Skip Bayless, who kind of started the whole rings culture and uh clutch gene and all these other like almost undefinable terms that we use to define players. So
Right.
I think that we can get deeper into it, but I think overall on the surface, I think that championships have their place. They have their value for sure. I think it definitely indicates that some players have something that certain other players don't have. But I think that when we do talk about great players, we can place too much value on whether or not they've won a championship. Because again, like we said with the Bucks and the Suns, there is only one winner every year.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. The way I kind of approach the question, it had me thinking about different like statistical principles. And there's this principle called the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule. And it basically serves as a general reminder that the relationship between inputs and outputs is not always balanced. What it basically shows is that 80%, the principle specifies that 80% of consequences come from 20% of the causes. And when you look at, so that's kind of abstract. But then I started to do some digging into the history of NBA championships. Remember that number 80-20. So since 1947, there have been 73 NBA championship teams. The Celtics and the Lakers make up 47% of those championships, at 17 chips apiece. The other teams with 3 or more championships make up about 8 of the 30 NBA franchises, or 26.7% of NBA franchises. And those franchises have 82% of the total team championships.
The Celtics, Lakers, and then the ones with 3 or more.
Yeah, make up 82% of the total team championships. So it just kind of shows you how rare in general, or how limited the access to an NBA championship is, and how many things beyond, how much history kind of really just plays a role in to defining a championship team, and how it's also just the few reap the benefits of the whole shebang. It's hard. Like I'm trying to find a good metaphor analogy, but like not everybody's going to get to the promised land, and that's just kind of a fact. 11 teams in the NBA have never won a championship at all, or even sniffed a conference finals. And winning an NBA championship is really hard, and it often requires factors that are out of a lot of players' control, such as GM, coaching, teammates, and health. But I do think that it's not overrated, and I do think that NBA championships kind of represent the pinnacle of the league and the pinnacle of the sport, as well as the fact that the majority of NBA championships have been won by players who have been the best in the league at the time, or close to the best in the league, and really asserts the level of dominance that a player is actually able to have on the league. And when I look at it that way, it says to me that the championship actually represents players that are able to rise above the fray and really showcase themselves as being the best out there. So you think about, the Lakers dynasty in the early 2000s. You think about the Kobe Lakers. You think about the Golden State Warriors. You think about the Jordan Bulls. You think about the Showtime Lakers and the Celtics with the Bill Russell era. And you just think about overall dominant players that have been able to impose their will on the rest of the league. And when I consider that, and I look at the teams that they played against, I think about how Patrick Ewing went up against Hakeem Olajuwon in the NBA Finals and ultimately got outplayed, which is why the Houston Rockets were able to win 2 in a row. And you think about all the players that Jordan went against and how they, at the end of the day, where all came up short against him, he and his team were able to ultimately on the floor exert their will over their opposing teammates. So I think NBA championships really are a great litmus test for how great players are, and shows you who's able to rise above the fray. So I think it's actually correctly rated.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I think it goes both ways. I think we both have a point in terms of like it does not validate, but it does express how great a player is if they're able to lead their team to a championship. I guess my argument is just that it doesn't mean a player is not great if they're not able to. Because there's certain players where they won one championship and they're forever viewed as better than all the players that didn't win one. And I think that that classification is a little bit wonky for me. It's a little unwarranted. Like, does that make Dirk Nowitzki really better than Charles Barkley because he has one championship? You know what I'm saying? When prior to that championship, like Dirk Nowitzki was like, there were so many questions about his career and his toughness and all of these other aspects of his basketball career. But once he was able to win, it kind of washed away all of those things. So who's to say like Charles Barkley wouldn't have gotten that same treatment? Like Charles Barkley averaged like almost 40 points a game in the finals, but he just went up against a player that was better than he was. And that's not really his fault. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
yeah, but at the same time, Dirk Nowitzki went against arguably 2 players that were better than him. But his team and, his will to win.
That wasn't really LeBron though. That wasn't really LeBron. That's the worst basketball we've ever seen LeBron play. Not to take any credit away from Dirk or any credit away from the Mavericks, but that wasn't exactly like the best version of the Miami Heat, to be honest.
I don't know, man. It wasn't, but at the same time, when you're talking about greatness of individual players, he was able to rise above. His team was able to rise above.
Yes, and he deserves all the credit for that. But again, like, does that one championship make him better than Charles Barkley is my question. Because if you look at their career statistics, they line up very favorably. You know what I'm saying? They line up very well, and they both had great NBA careers. But I think with rings culture, like, it allows the space for that conversation to be had where it's just like, yes, they're in the same pantheon of player, but it's like in so many people's minds, it's like Dirk is now automatically just that much better because he has a championship, and it's just one championship. That's what I'm saying. It's like, if you want to ask who has a better career, Tim Duncan or Charles Barkley, like you can make the argument for Tim more so because he has 5. But I'm just talking about like 1 versus 0. Like, is it really that much of a difference? It's like rings culture is like the reason why when Draymond and Charles Barkley get into a tiff, like Draymond can just like basically take a crap on Charles Barkley because he hasn't won a ring. And it's like people that are current NBA fans or casual NBA fans may not realize, like, most people think of Charles Barkley as far and away a better player than Draymond Green. I mean, it depends on how you value defense and how you value other intangibles, but most people would say that Charles was a better player. But like, because of rings culture, it's like he just gets to talk to him crazy because like he has 3 chips, you know, and it, like that's the part of NBA championships where I feel like they're overrated. I think, like you said, they deserve all the credit in the world for winning those, and it does distinguish players for like leading their team with blood, sweat, and tears to what is ultimately the goal of the season for most teams, or at least most franchises over the course of ownership or over the course of a team being together. But yeah, I just think that when we start like, you know, giving someone like a gold star and just moving them up the list with just a championship, I feel like that's not necessarily the best quantifier for the quality of a player's career and their ranking all time.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall career accomplishments, as well as averages, etc., really help to holistically define a player's success. And I don't think championships is the only thing. But when it comes to getting a head-to-head matchup in certain comparisons, I do think it pushes one above the other. I'd have to look a little bit more into Nowitzki and Charles Barkley's career statistics to see how close they line up against each other. But if they are as close as I think they might be off the top of my head, then I would put Nowitzki above him. Just like
that's crazy.
Just like I would put no. Hear me out. Just like I would put the career accomplishments of a Chris Paul above a John Stockton if Chris Paul would get a championship. As well as other players. I think once you start going down the list of comparable players who just have 1 championship, maybe, then I think you can say, okay, yeah, this player at the highest level was able to outperform his counterpart.
I feel you. I'm just saying, like, I think that if you look at both of their career stats, I think that there is an argument for Dirk being a better player. I'm not saying that there isn't. I think that they're both in the same tier of player. My thing is just the notion that, like, oh man, these dudes are pretty level. Like, oh man, this dude won a chip. Like, oh, it's him now. Like, it's like, I don't know. It's just this the extra validation that a championship gives is just, I don't know. It's kind of weird to me. It's like if we thought about Chris Paul and John Stockton in the same conversation in the same tier, and then we suddenly like just vault Chris Paul over him because he won an NBA Finals. Like, it, I don't know. It just feels weird to me because there's so much context that's needed as well. Like, if you look at Chris Paul versus John Stockton, like, are we also contextualizing the eras that they played in? Because like basketball, like getting to where they want to on the floor and scoring and being able to exert their will is a lot easier for point guards now than it was then. So it's like there's so much context involved in the situation. It's like championships kind of remove a lot of that nuance for me a lot of times when we start having these conversations, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a long time. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we move on to the next topic?
So another interesting one. So Oscar Robertson won an NBA championship, right?
Yes, not necessarily. He didn't lead his team. He was second in command to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but yeah, he did.
Okay. Is Oscar Robertson better than Russell Westbrook, or is Russell Westbrook better than Oscar Robertson?
I think their careers are too far apart to judge that. It's too far. Like, it depends on what kind of argument you're having, because like if you take Russell Westbrook with his current skill level and then you put him in the 60s and 70s, he looks like a god. Like he's unstoppable because they just don't have the level of skill that players have now.
Which
Like,
Oscar Robertson was.
Yeah, he was, but I'm just saying, if you watch some of those old tapes, like sometimes he, like not Oscar, but like some of these guys are dribbling while looking at the ground, or they're not executing like crossovers as we know them. Like if you put Russell Westbrook in that era and he executes a Euro step, like the ref will probably stop the game. It's like you can't do that. But it's like, you can't. It's so hard to compare eras. Like it's easier to compare Russell Westbrook to someone like Jason Kidd, because they're a little bit closer in terms of the eras that they played in. But if you want to just look at career statistics, no, I don't think that Oscar's career statistics plus his NBA championship makes him better than Russell Westbrook.
Okay. I guess that's somewhere where we disagree, man. I think Oscar is one of the best point guards in NBA history. And his stats, as well as the relative career accomplishments and championship, kind of, in my eyes, puts him in just a slightly better level, man.
That's fair, but also in my eyes, I think Russell Westbrook is one of the best point guards in NBA history as well.
Yeah, but better Oscars.
It's a fair. It's all nuance. Like it's all there's so much subjectiveness when you start talking about these players. So it's like if you
and
I don't fault anyone.
Championships.
You could say stats are objective. I mean, Russ's. If you pull up Russ's basketball reference page, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's all subjective, and also like players back then didn't have to deal with the level of scrutiny in terms of their level of play that players have to deal with now. Like players are dissected like to the nth degree, unless they're like someone like KD, you can't dissect his game. You can only dissect his personality or his social media activities. Like, they're not dissected the way that they were back then. So I'm sure if Oscar Robertson played now, there would be so much made about the way that he plays. Like there would be some detractors. So you might view him a little bit differently if he played now.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but I mean, yeah, we got a whole summer, bro, after the finals are over. So we will be going to our corners on this conversation for now, but we'll be back. Join our conversation, man. Do you guys think the NBA championships are overrated or overvalued? Hit us with an email, hit us up on IG, whatever you want to do, and let us know what you think, and we'll shout you out on the show.